This week, the documentary came out called You Are What You Eat. It's an experiment on twins, and it's positioning a vegan diet against an omnivorous diet.
So for the next 8 weeks, we'll be investigating the pros and cons of a healthy diet that contains meat and dairy versus a healthy diet without either of them.
So I'm going to be watching this alongside you guys, and I'm going to be reacting as you go through, because it's created quite a storm on social media on both sides of the fence. The pro-vegan crowd are propping this up as the next game changers, the next Netflix propaganda documentary which will convince you and your family to go vegan. It's an experiment, so let's see what the science says in this, shall we?
You mix cheese in it?
Yeah, I was gonna put a little bit.
When was the last time you had a burger?
Last night.
And kind of a guilty laugh because the guy says, oh, last night. And then, oh, we grew up eating hot dogs and Spam. So you can kind of see here that it might be setting us up for a fall, right? It's propping up all of these foods that I'm going to guess are going to be told that are not so healthy.
Identical twins are the perfect natural experiment because each individual has identical genes in every cell of its body. So they are the perfect way to tell nature from nurture.
The difficulty around nutritional science is that it's very hard to control for all of the variables, which is a very valid point, and that different people respond to different foods differently. And the hypothesis is that if you have twins, because they are identical twins, you've got the cleanest kind of close match sample that you could possibly have. And they say it's a perfect nutritional experiment. Now, that's a pretty bold statement because even though these are identical twins, they have not lived identical lives. So there is still going to be some differences, how they grew up, what they were into, and what foods they ate before, and we don't know any of that context. So a bit of a bold claim to say that it's the perfect nutritional experiment, but we'll run with it.
My name is Christopher Gardner. I have a PhD in nutrition science. I've been here for 30 years, and recently I started feeding, bleeding, and pooping people. The study aim here is to investigate the impact of you guys on these two different diets for cardiovascular health, metabolic status, and the gut microbiome.
What he did not mention, though, is any effects on muscle mass, which I think there's a reason why, which we'll get to at the end.
The most recent nutrition research suggests some benefits to eating a plant-based diet. But some nutrients, like calcium, iron, and protein, are easier to get from meat and dairy.
Credit, he does say that in the vegan diet, there are lots of purported benefits. He also acknowledges that in a vegan diet, it can be hard to come across certain nutrients in food, which they highlight as B12, calcium, iron, omega-3s, protein, and vitamin D.
If steak was not unhealthy to consume every single day, yes, I would eat steak.
If steak wasn't unhealthy to eat every day, I'd probably eat steak every day. Well, Wendy, we got news for you. You can eat steak every day. If you like steak, go chow down on some steak, Wendy. It is healthy.
Real meat is why people make fake meat. But real meat's good.
Real meat is the reason that they make fake meat, and he's team omnivore.
The animal agriculture sector industrialized using very production line model, and over time, factory farms took over to improve efficiency.
There's a very prominent figure in the vegan space, one of the most exalted figures in that space, author of many books like How Not to Die, and a huge proponent, not only of veganism, but a huge figure and powerhouse in this continuous attack to convince the population that they shouldn't be eating any meat and that all meat is contributing to heart disease, diabetes, as well as the destructions of our environment. So already we're at 12 minutes in and we start to see the vegan narrative creeping more and more into the series.
All I ever really wanted in life was to be able to enjoy a bottle of great wine and some fancy cheese. The reason for that is because it's biologically addicting.
So they hit us with the old, dairy is very addictive because it's got casein in it, and that makes us feel good and it makes us want more of it, and it's highly, highly addictive and it's super hard to get off. And look, maybe the reason that eating cheese makes us feel good is because it's really nutrient dense and our body knows how to recognize healthy foods. There's maybe a case to be made that cheese could be mildly addictive, but I've never seen anybody snorting lines of Parmesan in the toilet, so I'm not sure about the claims of how addictive cheese actually is.
I've never eaten meat. There's been a strong push in the media that has convinced people that you cannot get adequate protein, you cannot get adequate nutrition without meat and dairy. But there's been about 15,000 people that have come through my programs. And about the 2 to 3 week mark, they'll start to noticeably feel different in their energy levels.
And you have to wonder here, is that the absence of meat in the diet, or is it the fact that if somebody's working with a coach and at about the 3 week mark, they've probably removed so many of the processed foods and all of the junk and the garbage, and if you swap out sausage and egg McMuffins for breakfast and start eating some beans, you probably would feel better after 3 weeks. What happens after 30 weeks? What happens after 3 months? What happens after 3 years? This seems to be the long-term problems. And what's interesting in the conclusion of this documentary is this protein conundrum with the vegans and the inability to hold on to muscle and potentially losing muscle at the end of the experiment, which kind of counteracts his point.
If you don't eat plant carbohydrates, your microbes actually start eating you.
She makes a pretty bold statement. There are lots of people that choose to either forego plant carbohydrates entirely or greatly limit them, who seem to improve their gut health and reduce symptoms of things like ulcerative colitis and all other manner of issues, like was my personal story. So that's an interesting point that I'm not sure holds too much truth.
Your body fat percentage, Wendy, is 45.9%. And yours, Pam, is 44.5%.
The woman that's ran the DEXA says, and you weighed 202 pounds total weight, and you weighed 183 pounds. So we can already see that even though these are identical twins, that's a starting difference of 20 pounds in weight. That is certainly not nothing, and that's certainly going to skew results one way or another. And in episode 2, we meet another politician, Mr. Eric Adams, the mayor of New York, who also, if you know, has introduced meatless Mondays into schools in New York.
That dark place for me was when I woke up one day unable to see the alarm clock.
The #1 cause of death in these United States is the American diet. But there's conflicts of interest among the Dietary Guidelines Committee.
New guidelines from the USDA and Department of Health and Human Services are supposed to tell you what to eat.
And I'm just wondering if you could acknowledge the conflict of interest of the people that back documentaries like this with a clear incentive to paint veganism in a positive light and denigrate meat consumption. Is that not the same kind of conflict of interest you are trying to say exists on the other side?
My name's Thomas Locke, and I am a regenerative cattle rancher in Northeast Texas on family land that we have owned since 1850. It is insane that we are cutting down the Amazon rainforest so that we can get a $1 cheeseburger at McDonald's. We believe in eating much, much less meat than the average consumer, even if it's from a regenerative source.
So even the guy that they're trying to middle ground here and present as a pro-meat figure is still taking a pretty staunch stand against our meat consumption, which is interesting.
The world is on thin ice, according to the UN's latest and most alarming climate report. Humanity is on track to blow past the goal of limiting warming of the planet to 1.5 degrees Celsius in the next 10 years.
A lot of climate scientists have used 1.5 degrees Celsius as a critical threshold for climate change. And it's not arbitrary, it's because around that temperature, a lot of the most catastrophic consequences of global heating, like melting in the Arctic and collapse of coral reefs, go from moderate risk to high risk around that temperature.
And whilst I don't have all the data on top of my head, I think some incredible people have done amazing work in this field to counter some of these claims and show that they are not the whole picture. They are not the whole truth. You could check out The Sacred Cow by Diana Rogers and Rob Wolf. You could go to the Sustainable Dish blog. She cites research and facts that actually paints a more nuanced picture of what this is. And this isn't to defend factory farming operations. We're huge proponents of regenerative agriculture, but you also have to bear in mind that when these stats are cherry-picked the way they are and are painted with these dramatic images and these awful, videos and insider footage from caged animal feeding operations, it is very emotionally triggering. It makes you want to reject that system. And it's very clever what they do, but it's also a little bit sly, and it's not the whole truth.
So some of this is like 20% fat. You can see the white lines The fat content of farm salmon can be over 3 times higher than wild salmon.
We're saying much of similar things here, that where your food comes from matters. Like the farmed salmon versus the wild salmon. The wild caught salmon is a health food. It's roundabout making the same point that we would make. And I think a lot of the issues arise here around the farming of the food and our systems, not necessarily the food itself.
Wendy and Pam, they both lost weight. Pam, the vegan, lost almost 8 pounds. She did lose 1 pound of fat, but she also lost almost 7 pounds of muscle. Wendy, the omnivore, lost over 3 pounds total. 100% of what she lost was all muscle.
100?
And she gained fat.
In episode 4, we basically get down to the brass taxes. We're looking at results, and when Pam and Wendy walk in, both of them haven't done very favorably on either of the diets, the omnivore or the vegan diet. And in the example of Pam on the vegan diet, she lost 7.6 pounds throughout the experiment. Great. 6.6 of those pounds were muscle.
Well, let's just get right into it. Visceral fat, that's that bad stuff around the organs. In your case, it didn't move that much. It went from 0.22 pounds to 0.21 pounds. I mean, this is not a statistically significant change. John was the vegan, and your visceral fat went from 0.37 pounds to 0.03 pounds. You almost don't register any. The meat eat over here. You made 7.1 pounds of muscle.
Wow.
And had you not consumed more food, that's not the number that would be on the paper.
What I doubted for the vegans was the ability to put on muscle due to lack of protein sources.
And our second set of twins that appear, they basically kind of just wipe away our omnivore. Wait a minute, I thought these were identical twins that were going to get superior results from being on the vegan diet. The non-vegan, the omnivore, gained 7.2 versus John's 3.2, and all of the section was about how cool it was that the vegan gained 3.2 pounds of muscle, not that the omnivore gained over double that.
These are your genitals. You were not the vegan person.
Yes.
But you did exercise. And the entire thing was 288% increase in your arousal.
We get to keep this. Yeah?
You get to keep that after all your work.
Working with something here.
All right, Pam, you went on the vegan diet, and this is like a house on fire. Look at you. It is amazing. So are you both going to stay on the vegan diets? What do you think?
One of the most profound effects on your sexual desire, performance, health, libido is actually exercise, and it's movement, and it's a lot of other things. So to just pull out one thing and say, ha, see, gotcha, it's because you ate more beans, doesn't tell the whole story.
When we sat down and they brought out the first course of asparagus, which was the most beautiful food I'd ever seen. It was like artwork on the table. And I took that first bite, I just thought, where am I and what am I eating?
How many people actually have those skills in the kitchen? I don't have to try very hard to make a ribeye steak taste like a 10 out of 10. I can't imagine how much effort has to go in to making some asparagus be a transcendent experience, as one of the reviewers described. Like, if you find God in asparagus, good on you.
The last results of the twins nutrition study are on the epigenome, or biological clock.
All right, so we're gonna switch gears a little bit away from metabolism and talk about aging, in addition to chronological age. How many years old is someone? We also use 2 different methods to estimate your biological age. The first one is the length of the telomeres, which are protective caps on the ends of strands of DNA.
Length of telomeres actually decreases as we age. If your telomeres stay longer, you're actually in better health and have a younger biological age relative to your chronological age.
Every vegan, apart from one, every vegan lost muscle, and how muscle is so closely tied to longevity, and muscle is so closely tied to a long, healthy lifespan. So what is this telomere? It's very new science. It's very fluffy. It's not as factually, black and white as, oh, telomere length is indicating that you're going to live to be 120 years old. There's nuance here. And when you isolate for certain things, and you've essentially designed a study to find those things, you will find them and you'll be able to support your evidence.
This is why in in New York City, we have introduced to all of our hospitals as a default menu a plant-based chef of the day special.
The mayor of New York is back and he talks about plant-powered Fridays and meatless Mondays and how this is such a huge thing that we have to basically push this into our education and schools. And I don't know, it gives me a little bit of the ick because a lot of these inner city kids, the only solid meals that they get are what they are fed at school. And now you're taking away the most nutrient dense part of that meal, some kind of protein, and you're putting what in its place? You're putting some quinoa, some soybeans, or some impossible food, some frankenfood sprayed with God knows what, laced with God knows what oils.
We can solve a lot of the issues that are hurting us and crippling our planet by just rethinking what's at the end of our fork.
And Tim, our closing statement comes from him that if everybody just clicked the fingers and stopped eating meat overnight, we would basically reverse climate change, we would get healthier, the planet would heal, humans would be healthier, animals would most certainly be healthier, and it would be all happily ever after. But to throw all the baby out with the bathwater and say that because of a few bad eggs that all meat is bad and that every bite of a cheeseburger is a puff of smoke in the Amazon rainforest and that this will unequivocally decrease your lifespan and accelerate the timeline for the earth ending seems a little bit fraudulent and a little bit nihilistic. I think a case for better meat has to be made, and these documentaries need to be taken with a grain of salt. They are clearly engineered, reverse engineered, produced to tell a very sexy and very compelling story, but it's only one side of the coin. And this clearly has a lot of funding, a lot of monetary backing, and a lot of momentum behind it. But you can't deny the momentum of our history and our evolution. We are humans. What made us humans is eating meat. Do we need to source better meat? Do we need to fix some of the broken inputs? Absolutely. But meat should be on our plates, and it has a place in the healthiest human diet. And the solution isn't to go vegan for everyone. The solution is to do better, to choose better, to vote with our dollars, and to always question very black and white documentary series like this one. So if you want to go watch it, let me know what you thought in the comments. Let me know if you agree or disagree. We'll be happy to keep doing these, and we'll see you on the next D Reacts.